Hi everyone, I am going to talk to you guys today about something that I get asked about a lot, and I feel like this is probably one of the most frustrating / mysterious parts of the perimenopause menopause phase, because it seemingly comes out of nowhere, and no matter what you do, no matter what you change, or if you haven't changed anything, it doesn't seem to go anywhere. And that is, of course, the Meno belly, or the midsection, the growing midsection that seems to often come along with this phase of our lives. And I want to chat to you about why it's there. So just knowing a bit of the reasons behind why it's there in the first place, why it's happening in the first place, and also, of course, as usual, some practical strategies that you can use to actually tackle it, because that's what we all want to know, right? So if you are someone who I don't care about the why, just tell me what to do, maybe skip forward 10 minutes if you're watching the replay. If you're watching the live, I am going to take you through a condensed version of the why, because I think it's actually important to know why things are happening to us so that we can know the reasons that we need to do something about it, and then we can get into tackling the how to actually tackle it with our behaviors and our habits. So I think the good news is although this is a very frustrating part of this phase, there are things that you can do about this menopause belly, and they don't involve hundreds of crunches, hours of cardio, cutting out carbs, any of those extreme things that we may think we need to do. So that's the good news. First, I want to just, like I said, dive into the why behind it. It might surprise you to learn, and I think it probably surprised me, but that men and women in their 40s and 50s gain fat roughly at the same rate, but it's more the women, maybe as women we're more conscious of it or more aware of it, or more there's more attention on women's bodies, who knows. But for whatever reason, it definitely is a really talked about topic, this kind of menopause belly, menopause or midlife, midsection, whatever you want to call it. And despite how it feels and what many women think, that the hormonal changes that happen during menopause are not actually the primary driver of weight gain, despite how that might feel. So in other words, menopause itself is not to blame, but there are changes to our hormones that can lead to where our body fat is distributed, hence around the belly. And body fat does respond to changes in sex hormones. So it's not in your imagination, but all I'm saying is it's not menopause itself that's causing the weight gain, but there's some things along with menopause that go hand in hand with it that can contribute to it. So during menopause, as estrogen and progesterone levels decrease and your follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, levels go up, this is the time women often notice fat accumulating around the midsection. And as FSH increases, it does tend to increase weight gain by inhibiting thermogenesis. I will come back to that term in a moment if you're not sure what that is all about, and favoring fat accumulation. So there is a shift to more abdominal and visceral fat. The reason this is significant is that visceral fat is that dangerous fat that we don't want, that fat around our organs. That's a major risk factor for type 2 diabetes and heart disease and other conditions. So this is a really important reason, I think, why it's important not to just blow it off and say, oh, I'll just buy a bigger size of jeans. Like that might be necessary anyway, but that it's not just an increase in pant size that's the issue here, that it is actually a health issue, that visceral fat. So the more we can do to address that and not be stressed about it, but just address the fact that it's there and, okay, what can we do to fix that? Then that's going to be really helpful for our health in general. So thermogenesis, that's just the heat production in our body, which does impact our resting metabolism, that your metabolism of kind of your internal fire. So we want heat production, not in the form of hot flashes, that's not what I'm talking about here, but just that general kind of burning of the flames, fanning of the flames internally does impact our metabolism. And when I go into the strategies on how to fix the belly fat or how to address it, we'll come back to how to influence your thermogenesis. Coming back to the cause for the weight gain. So studies have shown that, so far anyway, the studies that we have, that aging in and of itself, or menopause is in and of itself, is not the cause of the weight gain, that it's more likely due to a combination of factors. So moving less is one thing, and it might not even be a significant decrease increase in activity, but just small or slight decrease in activity while eating the same. So less activity, there's a decrease in energy expenditure, and obviously the potential for fat gain can increase. Because of course, fat, like anything, like muscle, can't be created out of nothing. So we're not just putting on fat out of nowhere. It does require an energy surplus. But here is where our hormones can play a sneaky part. So when estrogen is high, it tends to lower appetite and it increases energy expenditure via the central nervous system. But when estrogen drops, appetite goes up. So think about that time, like if you still get a period or you remember the time when you did, those premenstrual cravings when you could eat everything, like those few days before your period started, when estrogen is low, that's when your appetite drives up. So it's easier to eat more. And then add to that, like even a slight lowering of energy output through lower thermogenesis, like we just spoke about, and slightly less daily movement. And all of a sudden that energy balance is thrown out. So that can explain the weight gain. And then I'm going to come back to the belly fat specifically now. So why does it decide to just all land around that midsection specifically? Now, like with a lot of research into menopause and this phase of life, the research is probably not conclusive. It's still a little bit murky when it comes to this, but experts strongly suspect that as our ovarian production of estrogen slows, so our ovaries start to slow down until they stop making estrogen altogether, and it comes to a halt, it sends this signal to our brain that more estrogen needs to be made, because essentially hormones are just chemical messages, right? They travel through the body to different parts of the body and send signals to tell the body to act in a certain way. So when our ovarian production of estrogen drops or comes to a halt, then it sends a signal to your brain that more needs to be made. And did you know this? Your fat is another source of estrogen. So when your ovaries stop making the estrogen and your brain, we need some more estrogen made here, body. Let's start to favor fat accumulation because we can make some estrogen out of that body fat. So during peri and then particularly post-menopause, your body's looking to create more estrogen and your body fat is a source of that estrogen. So it starts to prioritize making that. So that sounds like all doom and gloom, like we're all doomed to this growing waistline, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. So now, of course, as I promised, I'm going to talk through some specific strategies around how to address this, how to minimize it, how to reverse it, how to fix it. So really what we want to do, we just talked about those hormones being chemical messengers. What we want to do is send some very clear signals to the brain that we want to ramp up thermogenesis, so ramp up that metabolism and use the energy that we do consume for muscle, not fat accumulation. So there are some very specific things we can do. Some of these are going to be things that I talk about all the time. And the beauty is these are beneficial for all sorts of things, but they definitely are beneficial for belly fat or reducing or eliminating it. So number one, these are in no particular order, mind you, but I've just started with the nutrition changes we can make, or the nutrition priorities for you. Number one is to eat more fiber. Okay, so fiber, studies are very clear on this. Studies show fiber promotes weight loss by a couple of reasons. One, it helps you feel full, so you naturally eat less. And then it might also decrease the number of calories your body absorbs from that food. So when you're eating foods high in fiber, it acts as a bit of a broom in your body. You're excreting more than like a lot of those calories that you're absorbing. You're not absorbing all of those calories. And what's more, there's been this really interesting study, possibly more than one, but certainly one that I've come across, that shows soluble fiber might actually help to fight belly fat. So this observational study, over 1,000 adults, found that for every 10 gram increase in soluble fiber, belly fat gain decreased by 3.5% over 5 years or something like that. So it might seem insignificant, but when you think that we are decade on decade putting on more and more belly fat, and I don't have the stats with me, but actually the amount of visceral fat in menopause is far higher than the amount of visceral fat that we have pre-menopause. So any decrease in that belly fat, in that visceral fat, is going to be beneficial. And if fiber helps to reduce it by a few percent, then fantastic. So when I talk about soluble fiber, I just talk about plants because it's easy to remember. All plants have fiber. Some have more than others. So some good sources of soluble fiber are flax seeds is one good one, Brussels sprouts or your cruciferous vegetables, avocados, legumes, chickpeas and beans and lentils and berries. They're all really great sources of soluble fiber. All things that are probably pretty easy to incorporate more of in our diet. Now, just coming back to that fiber, if you don't already know this, the kind of gold standard for fiber for women over 40 is at least 25 grams of fiber per day. If that means nothing to you and you don't track fiber at all and you have no idea how much fiber is in your food at the moment, I would definitely recommend tracking your food and at least having a look at your fiber intake and your protein, which you're going to come to in a moment, for a couple of weeks, because it can be quite confronting and quite insightful of how little fiber most of us eat if you're not really conscious of increasing it. When I coach my clients and I'm looking at their food diaries, 9 times out of 10 when we're starting out and they're not conscious of this to begin with and they're just tracking what they eat generally in a day, their fiber levels are around 8 or 10 grams a day, right? So less than half of what they should be ideally. So we really want to get them up to around 25, 30 grams of fiber a day is ideal. Number 2, on the nutrition side of things, protein. Yes, I know, the old protein again, but it is important, so hear me out. So a lot of observational studies, again, come back to that, show that people who eat more protein tend to have less abdominal fat than those who eat a lower protein diet. Whether that's just because they have less body fat in general, they eat fewer calories, I don't know, but less abdominal fat is a good thing. So one of the things that protein does, we're going to come back to that term again, thermogenesis. It increases thermogenesis. There's a higher thermic effect when you eat protein, so your body needs to use more calories to digest protein than it does carbs or fat, a significantly higher number of increase in thermogenesis. When you eat protein, your body uses about 25 to 35% of those calories just to digest it. So if you were to eat 1,000 calories worth of protein, you're only digesting about 700-ish calories. So it's taking you about 300-ish calories just to digest and burn that protein. So really, like, the energy that you consume from protein ends up being less in real terms. If most of your diet is protein and fiber, veggies and lean protein, then that's going to really help from that thermogenesis side of things, from digestion, and also it's important from a muscle building perspective, which I'll come to in a moment. Also very important from a belly fat point of view. Strength training, another one of my favorite topics that you're probably sick of me talking about it, but I will never stop talking about it. So listen up. Strength training, more muscle equals higher resting metabolic rate. So we want to keep that thermogenic effect high. We want to keep your metabolism burning, not slowing down. Because when it slows down and it sends that signal to your body to store fat, then that's when that body fat starts to accumulate, that belly fat starts to accumulate. So we really want to send that signal to your brain to put on muscle, to lay down muscle, and bone would be great, but not belly fat. So we need to do that by eating enough protein and then resistance training. Resistance training, I've gone into this in previous lives before about what that entails. It can starting out, you could just be doing body weight things, and then you're going to increase that over time to adding some weights and things like that so that we are getting stronger over time. But it's really important that we are resistance training, strength training to build that muscle, and then send that signal to your brain that we want muscle, not body fat. The other really interesting thing around, I know like resistance training is great for muscle all over, but when it comes to abdominal fat specifically, resistance training actually triggers hormones that increase abdominal fat burning. Cardio doesn't do that. So when you think about resistance training and just building muscle, but it actually also triggers those hormones that increase abdominal fat burning. So that is a really important part of things too. The other thing it does is increases insulin sensitivity. So if anyone has insulin resistance or pre-diabetes, or we are all over 40, we're at much higher risk of insulin resistance than we were pre-40 as estrogen drops away. So it improves insulin sensitivity, helps you manage blood sugar levels, both of which help prevent visceral fat gain. So very important there. Two more tips that I have for you. Sprint interval training or high intensity interval training, also very important for that. It's also very effective for reducing visceral fat gain. So again, setting the signals to the brain, releasing those hormones to burn belly fat, sprint interval training. So when I talk about that, or high intensity intervals. The reason I say sprint interval is because it elicits more of it. It's an even higher intensity than high intensity. I think what I see a lot of the time is high intensity is a little bit moderate intensity. Yes, there's an effort, but it's not really an all-out effort. Sprint interval training is more, you lead like 10 to 30 second all-out efforts, like as hard as you can go. And it's really important for that fat burning metabolism as well. So 10 to 30 seconds, as hard as you can go. And it doesn't have to be obviously sprints as in running. It can be anything that really gets your heart rate up. It could be boxing, it could be ball slams, it could be ropes, it could be on the rower at the gym, like anything that really where you have to work as hard as you possibly can for that period of time, and then you recover. So we're not doing that 20 times in a row. We're doing it once and then recover, and then do it again and then recover, etc. So that's how that sprint interval training works, and very effective for visceral fat burning. The final tip here, and this is going to be applicable to just about every woman over 40 that I know, need to work out how to lower your stress. So lower stress, high cortisol level. So stress equals cortisol. Now, small bursts of cortisol, acute cortisol, is a good thing, right? Exercise induces cortisol. You have high cortisol when you wake up. We need cortisol to fight or flight, and energy and all of that can be really beneficial. But when it's chronic, when it's cortisol all day long is raised because you're stressed and you're rushing and you got stuff to do and places to go and people to see, then that can increase appetite and it can drive abdominal fat storage. So we need to work out ways to lower that cortisol so it's not up here all the time. It's this kind of nice undulating wave of high and then we relax, then high and then we relax. That's another topic in and of itself. I think stress would be a great topic for another Facebook Live where I can go into some more strategies. But just for now, just know that is going to impact your abdominal fat as well. Now, that comes to the end of my tips and the how and the why. Let me know if you have any questions. I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.